Hey guys, Steven here with ProTEQ. We're back for another engineering review of the Sig P365. We're at 8,500 rounds on this so far. It's been through a lot of training, a lot of competitions, and it's been shot by a lot of different people. And so far it's still running strong, and I figured we'd take the opportunity. This one was made or dated at January of 2018. I figure we might as well compare it to a brand new Sig P365 while we're at it. So we'll start the video out with a little bit of shooting. I've got two topped off 12 round magazines. I was gonna dual wield them, but dual wielding sucks. So I'm gonna actually take time and shoot each one and see if the group size changes any from one gun to the other. So this is the first generation, the one manufactured January of 2018. Here we go. This is at about 10 yards. Gonna shoot the silhouette on the right. Now on to the brand new one, manufactured sometime this year. I'd say both perform equally. Felt recoil's the same. I like the new sights though. So alright, let's step inside and check it out. Okay guys, so we're back in the shop. We've got the brand new P365 here and the old original. I'm going to go ahead and take my holster off for a second and show it to you as well. We make these. This is called a Kybrid. It is kind of the best of both worlds between an all Kydex holster and a hybrid holster. So you've got the safety and repeatability of an all Kydex rig. Notice the good positive retention, adjustable retention, full coverage of the trigger guard on both sides of the gun. And then we've got a premium horsehide backer to disperse the pressure against your body, and it molds directly to the shape of your body. So this fits my side very well. It's built for all day, everyday carry with professional grade materials, and yeah, we make these. So check them out on our website. Now, on to the P365. I'm going to reposition you guys. One moment. Okay guys, now we're going to do an in-depth review of the 8,500 round count performance of the P365, and then we're going to compare the components of the old original 365 to the new ones that are available today. And so here we go guys. I'm going to adjust the camera down and we're going to talk about the original. So again, we're at 8,500 rounds. Shot a lot of different ammos through it. We've shot a lot of factory ammo through it, a lot of reloads. Very seldom we have a malfunction on the gun itself. Most of the time it would be a problem with the reloaded ammunition, and even those were few and far between. I've kept a very accurate round count log of it and recorded any necessary observations. Per our last video, the 5,000 round review video, the same issue of the dead front sight exists. The front sight no longer glows. The tritium insert failed in it pretty quickly, and that's one of the reasons why they upgraded to the new sights on the later generations. The barrel has done great. I'm kind of amazed that there aren't hardly any witness marks on the top right here on the unlocking corner of the barrel. Like on most guns, you'll see a lot of wear in that area. The P365 has little to no wear, and that's probably due to it unlocking rather quickly, which is why the striker tip will drag on the primer. With the sear in the trigger block, I've noticed there is a small, ever so small piece that has appeared to round off and possibly even deform a little bit on the sear surface inside of the chassis. I probably won't be able to get much of an angle on the camera here to show you, or to get it to focus. There we go, maybe. But on the left side of the sear, I've got a little bit of deformation. Originally, I thought I might have chipped a piece of material off, but I think that's more so just the wear and tear that this gun has experienced since you know, it's been fired 8,500 times. That's a pretty tall order for a micro class pistol, and Sig probably wasn't intending on this gun being fired nearly that much, but it's based off of the 320 chassis design, and chassis guns, in my opinion, are a much better solution for a polymer framed pistol than an overmolded solution like what Glock is famous for. They have old overmolded metal rails that the polymer frame molds around in the molding process. Whereas with this chassis, we can pop this pin and the entire chassis will come out of the gun, out of the frame, like that. So we can replace the frame with different colors or different shapes, sizes, whatever, different accessory, rail mounting methods or built-in accessories. There's a lot of options with this concept, and it's a cleaner approach than having interchangeable back straps. But the frame, I mean, this frame, because it's a chassis design, the frame has an opportunity to absorb, the polymer frame has an opportunity to absorb the recoil impulse over several areas, and they've got a big piece of material right here inside of right above where the trigger is, and that appears to absorb the majority of the blow from the slide impacting the rear, as well as from the shot itself. And you can see that contact surface on the chassis is right there. And I've got no cracking, no visible cracking. The gun has performed quite well frame-wise. On the chassis, you'll notice we've got some polished areas, namely on the rails where the slide will rub against the rail. That's all polished and smooth. And mind you, this is a nitrocarburized coating, so that black layer, that black oxide layer, that can wear off, but the nitrocarburize is still present on the device, which is a lot of people think that the coating is worn off, but it's not. It's still present. Just the oxide layer is gone. The sear is nicely polished from all of the dry firing and live firing that's gone on with it. Really no complaints, guys. This gun has done a wonderful job. Everything I stated in the 5,000 round review still applies. I did notice around the 7,000 round mark, the trigger got a somewhat of a tick in it, and I took the slide off, and I noticed that area on the sear right there. but over the last 1,000 rounds or so, that's smoothed back out. And cleaning, I have not cleaned this gun but just a few times since I got it at the beginning of the year. Last year, well, I guess it was spring of last year, I won this gun in a competition, a month-long competition, and I happened to win it. And when I got it, it had had about 3,000 rounds put through it already, and I've put the additional 5,500 on it myself. So, very happy with its performance. Let's pop the slide off here, take a look at it. Or pop the striker assembly out. Striker tip, which is kind of the big talking point, if you will. The striker tip looks great. And if you watch our previous videos, I specifically did a video on the striker itself. This is a very robust shape for the striker, and the fact that it's a metal injection molded component means that the grain structure in the metal actually follows the geometry. So this is a better solution. When done right, this is a better solution than machining it from billet. So the Military Arms Channel one that grenaded in the first 100 rounds or whatever it was, that one probably squeaked through the quality department, I would imagine, at Sig, because there's no way that it would have passed had they inspected that specific component. That happens sometimes. I mean, that I've seen it happen with machined firing pins too, and machined strikers. I'm an engineer in the gun industry. I'm working on my 12th year now. The past 2 years have been as a privately contracted engineer, so I can get on here and kind of say what I want about different companies' products. I'm not bound by any specific company, which is kind of nice. But so don't change your striker out. These are very good strikers, and honestly, to do a quick litmus test or a quick verification test, which you should be doing anyways, shoot your gun a few hundred times before you start carrying it. Do some training on the range, maybe even take a course, or compete a little bit with it. Get used to it, because I mean, this is a device that you're looking at potentially protecting yourself with, so you need to practice and train with it. And that few hundred rounds of fire will show you more often than not if you've got any component in your gun that is going to fail prematurely. Now Sig, I'm not sure how many rounds they put through this thing through an individual gun in testing. I know when I was at one of my previous companies, we put close to 1 million rounds through one of the guns we developed, and there were several individual guns. Now that 1 million was spread out over multiple guns, but there were several individual guns that had upwards of 50,000 rounds on them, several in the 20,000 round mark. I would not hesitate to guess that this gun would go for 20,000 rounds. I don't know that I'm going to put that many on it, to be honest, because I've got a large list of additional guns that I've been requested to review, and I could probably spend the rest of my life reviewing them. And mind you, when I review a gun, I don't just take it, pull it apart, and talk about it. I actually put it through its paces. And I want to put several thousand rounds on it and gather data over time, gather user feedback over time, so I give you a quality, judgment on the performance of that specific gun. So this thing gets 2 thumbs up from me. We got one minor issue with the tritium in the front sight, and depending upon how you hold your flashlight in a low light environment, you'll light up your sights anyways with your handheld tactical light. So you know, that's not a huge game changer. I would get that fixed if I were you, and you've got a first generation P365 and you have that issue. But all in all, you really don't have any foreseeable issues from my viewpoint with this gun, starting with the first gen on up to the third gen, because it only gets better with time. So now let's move on to the third generation gun. Let's see, we've got the first gen pulled apart here. I'm going to pull the third generation apart. I'm going to pause the video, I think, and pull it apart and then restart it and tell you about any differences I've seen. So I'll see you in a few. Okay guys, I'm back. I've reviewed the two guns, and I'm going to go over the visible changes that I can see. I took a few measurements just some basic calipers, and I'm going to give you some feedback. Obviously, you've got the sight update. They replaced the sights and gave the new one much more contrast than the old one. Get that focus going. The new one, now you've got, you know, a nice black on green contrast, where the old one was all the same color in daylight, and then at night the two rear would glow green, and the front one was supposed to glow orange but died rather quickly. Now you've got a much better contrast during the day, and these things glow really bright at night. Don't get those mixed up. There we go. Now let's go on to some of the things that might be a little less discussed on the web. The first one I see, and I'm looking for major, I'm looking at the major components, changes made to the major components, and the biggest component of any gun is the barrel. The most important component is the barrel. And I've noticed on the barrel, the unlocking angle and height of the unlocking surface are essentially the same. How it interacts with the chassis, that angle is the same. But I've noticed we've got a little bit of a change in the feed ramp. It looks like the feed ramp is a little less shallow. So on the old original one, you can see it's got a bit of a dip there. So that feed ramp it plunged a little bit deeper, whereas on the new one it's completely flat. Then if you look at the feed ramp surfaces, you can see that slight variation. Okay, this is the new one. Okay, now they probably did that to just eke out a little bit more performance and reliability in feeding certain specific types of ammo. So, and that sharp edge down there on the front, sometimes, and generally it was only with reloads, would catch the tip of the bullet, deform it a little bit and catch it up, and I'd get a failure of feed. Very seldom, but it would happen. Whereas with this one, we've got maybe 300-400 rounds on this one so far. It hasn't had any feeding issues, zero malfunctions. The new one, that is. Another area where I noticed they did a little bit of a change was that area I was talking about on the sear in the chassis. They added a little bit of material in that area I was telling you about on the left side. They added kind of a little nub there. And what that nub does is when you're resetting the trigger, that nub prevents the striker from touching the sear surface, if you will, until it's past it. So it can go down past it and engage on the sear surface. So that nub is kind of sticking up to prevent it from touching that surface until it passes it, and then it goes down and engages. So you won't get that rounding off effect like I got on my original one. Now that being said, I've got a rather crisp, polished sear surface on the original. I have no safety concerns with it, but it's polished a decent amount on the top of the sear surface. Right there, you can see that shiny kind of diagonal line. Whereas on the new one, you can see that nub I'm referring to. It's right there. That little nub right there. And that prevents the new one's striker from touching the sear surface until it's past it. So you can get positive engagement, and you got zero wear there. Not a safety concern in my opinion. I mean, because most people aren't going to get anywhere near 8,500 rounds on this thing. If you've got an earlier generation that doesn't have that little nub there. Another thing I noticed was the springs. The striker spring on the new one is considerably shorter than the striker spring on the old one. So they're both sitting at the same base height, and the new one is about an inch shorter than the old one. Now, there are a lot of things that go into a spring. You've got the wire diameter, which will change the spring force, the rate, the amount of force that the spring will apply at its two working locations, the compressed location, operating location, and the extended operating location when it actually causes the striker to impact the primer. They've probably, I would say they've probably added a little bit of force just at general feel. I don't have a spring force gauge here, so I can't give you those numbers, but the wire diameter, let me measure real quick, is roughly 28 thousandths on the new one and 25 thousandths on the old one. So they've gone up 3 thousandths. Also, you've got material. They probably stuck with the same material, but if they change material, that can also change the rate. And if they change the process, that can also change the rate. So they probably went up a little bit with their spring rate there to give that striker a little bit more power. The striker, I don't notice any changes on the striker. The striker looks the same. And to be honest, I don't blame them. I mean, there wasn't an issue with the design of the striker from the beginning. You know, the striker has been fine in my educated opinion, which I'm entitled to, and we all have them, just like we have specific orifices on our bodies. The striker is just fine. The tip, actually, they did change something. I take it back. They did change something. The tip is a little bit longer. I was looking at the sear surfaces and what have you at that first glance. The tip is a little bit longer. Here's the new one, and here's the old one. And you can see the tip is, I'm going to say, 30 thousandths more proud than the old one. And it looks like because of that, they were able to go in and they move this surface back a little bit. So our overall length is the same. If I put them even, you notice the tips are now in the same location. This surface has moved down, and they've made that radius there a little bit more pronounced. And what that'll do, that'll just distribute the stress over a larger radius. You know, if you've got something with a sharp corner in it, and you're stressing it, like if I've got an angle here and it's got a sharp corner in it, and I stress that, the stress riser, or the location where that's going to break, is right in the corner. So if we add a nice generous radius in there to spread that out, now we're distributing that stress across that radius. And I think they would have done that more for an insurance policy than anything, and possibly even to appease the masses so that they could say, hey, we fixed the striker. But in my opinion and my experimental data, there wasn't an issue with the original one. It probably just let a bad batch of components go through, or a bad handful of components made it through in a batch that passed inspection. That happens with solid machined components too. So there's no end all be all. This one's always going to be better than this one kind of mentality there. It just happens. Okay. The other change I noticed, the firing pin or the striker safety spring is a little bit different. Here is the original, and here is the new one, and it's a little bit bigger. Let's see, it's grown in its free length from 335 to 475. So they added 140 thousandths roughly to the length of that spring, and the spring wire diameter is we're looking at about 12 thousandths on the new one, and come on, 16 thousandths on the old one. So they went down in wire diameter and up in the free length. So what that gives them, it gives them a more room for that working length, the two working distances or displacements. They may have had an issue with that spring possibly taking a little bit of a set, or they wanted to vary the amount of force. Probably they just wanted to vary the amount of force that the striker safety was applying downward, because this thing prevents the striker from impacting the primer until the trigger is pulled. So it's a pretty important piece. I've never had an issue with the original one, but they probably made that to just maybe in conjunction with this additional modification to the sear with that little nub. They might have varied that to accommodate it a little bit. And then the only other change, if you will, that I noticed is the chassis retention pin. Here's the old one, and here's the new one. The new one has a bit of a conical tip to it, and the old one is much more cylindrical with a small chamfer at the end. That just aids in assembly, really. You're not going to see any performance changes there. That just makes it easier for them to push the pin into the frame and the chassis at the facility, or if you want to reassemble it at home, because the sharper edge on the front would interfere with the retention spring in the chassis when you go to assemble it. So that tapered edge will make it push that spring out of the way so the pin can go on through. Because with that sharp edge, you can hit the edge of the spring, and somebody could probably whack it with a hammer, deform the spring. Now you got to replace the spring and be more careful assembling it next time. Other than that, guys, this looks like a great new iteration of the P365. I apologize to those of you that have been wanting me to review other guns. I wear several different hats and really enjoy my job, and I am reviewing a couple of other guns offline right now and gathering data on them, and I'll be providing feedback on those in the coming months. But this is a really popular, hot topic gun right now, and rightfully so. There's nobody else this size in the gun market right now that has that many rounds of ammunition in it. There are companies that are getting closer, though. but nobody's exactly there yet. So the P365 is still a very coveted, highly desirable pistol. I will say one cute little gun that I'm reviewing, I'll share with you briefly, is the N1, if you've heard of it. It is it kind of fills a little bit of a niche. I've only got about 400 rounds on it so far, but it is a hammer-fired gun. And it has a striker-esque trigger pull, which is pretty cool. And the niche that this gun kind of fills is it's really easy to manipulate the slide because it's a hammer-fired gun. So I'll be interested to see how this little gun does in the coming months, but I won't be uploading a review video until I've shot it for several thousand rounds. But that's one you might want to check out. It's made by Narrow Arms. It's called the N1. Now it's closer to like the Shields and the Glock 43s. It's got a 7+1 magazine capacity. Still far from the Sig P365 in magazine capacity, but it's interesting. And it takes Glock sights. Any aftermarket Glock sights will go on this gun. Pretty good marketing choice, so hats off to you guys at Narrow for making that decision. But anyways, guys, that's the old and the new comparison and the 8,500 round review of the original P365. There it is, spread out in all of its glory. And you guys stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.